I had discovered this movie through like because every once in a while I'll go on a binge where it's like, what's a good horror movie that I probably haven't seen? Because, you know, I like those kinds of movies. And on like various lists, this is one that will always kind of pop up, at least in the ghost story realm, and as are many Japanese films. But
right.
This one just kept coming up, and I'm like, okay. And I read a little bit about it, and everyone was just saying it's crazy, and I'm like, okay, great. I Oh my god!
This is not what you expected.
This is
though.
not at all what I expected when they said it was crazy, and it was even more fascinating to me after the fact that the Criterion Collection embraced it. I mean, I guess it does make sense because they're all about preservation, and this is not the kind of film that a lot of people are going to love,
right?
But walking out of
this movie does some things that I've never seen film do.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
And I mean that like as a compliment.
No, me too.
Give me an example.
I mean, what of the stuff that it does that you've never seen before? I mean, the editing for sure is unlike
especially
anything.
The editing.
Unlike anything
especially
I've ever seen
the editing.
Before. There's a weird choice for the editing, just to give you how fucking crazy this movie is, and it's the tiniest little detail. It wouldn't just, but to me, I'm just like, that's such a strange choice. Is where the girl is like watching her friend do her hair, and she's kind of blinking her eyes and going back and forth. You can't really see.
I call that the Renner wink.
Okay.
Jeremy Renner did that wink one time.
You keep one eye open and one eye closed, and then you go back and forth.
Sure.
And the way the film illustrates this is by doing two shots, one slightly askew from the other, jumping back and forth. Now, why they needed to include that in the movie, I'm not entirely sure.
Right.
But
they try to illustrate points that you're just sort of like when they mention the cat. And then they black out everything except for a circle around the cat, so you know they're talking about the cat.
I call that the Porky Pig method.
Right.
I call that, that's like the Porky Pig edit.
So here's, I think, the best way I can sort of describe what this genre is if I had to. I mean, dude. On Twitter, I was starting to sort of come to the conclusion, and I'm still not even sure if I agree with this conclusion, that this movie is jumping between genres from scene to scene.
Maybe.
I mean, it has kung fu movie elements. It has obviously like comedy movie elements, even some like anime tropes, as well as the obvious like horror elements. But if I had to bulk it all together into one thing, I would probably say it was a campy horror movie with Japanese influence, like Japanese anime influence even.
I think this is a comedy. I would call it a comedy.
Well, in the same way that a campy horror movie is a comedy is what I'm saying.
Right. Precisely right, yeah.
But so it has a lot of comedy elements, but it's like a campy horror, but it's Japanese inspired. But it's not like a campy horror that we would watch in America.
Yeah. No, it's harder to pin down by just calling it a comedy. I mean, like you said, like with the imagery alone, just like with stuff that I've never seen before, like with the fucking like gorgeous breaking down like a porcelain doll and just having that matte effect with the fire behind her, which is very inventive.
It felt very Lynchian, but to a further extreme.
And here, no,
it did. The editing did. Lynch is much more than just his editing, but this editing was very Lynchian.
This is what I will say, and a lot of people say that David Lynch films are the best film representation of what a nightmare feels like. And as soon as I saw this film, I was like, nope, this is what it's like. This is entirely what it's like, at least for me anyway. Because the level of irreverence and the level of like I don't know how you describe this, but like the way continuity works in dreams and sort of the suddenness and randomness and the way things carry on as if it didn't even happen.
Right.
That's exactly what this film feels like, at least with its attitude, and even some of its imagery. It's really hard to process, and it's honestly, it might be one of the most surreal films I've ever seen in my life.
Lynch movies, I think, are a little more character driven than this.
Yes, yeah, but that's not how
I'm specifically talking about the editing, though.
Yeah, I get what you mean, but I've always found Lynch's movies to at least be grounded in some character. Yeah. There is some reality to it that
and I'm not saying this is a Lynch film at all. I'm just saying the editing is very Lynchian.
Yeah,
I mean, Lynch has three major things that I take away when I watch Lynch movies. Okay. It's obviously the editing is one. And then more particular than just the editing is the audio.
The sound design is always impeccable. Yes.
He's very, very sound focused. And then obviously the characters.
Yeah.
I'm just talking about editing here.
Yeah. The film, and yeah, I'm kind of talking about the filmmaking too, in terms of like illustrating what a nightmare film feels like.
Yeah.
This is a little closer to that than actually. I'm not even gonna say a little. This is pretty much it.
Yeah,
this is exactly it. It doesn't has nothing to do with characters.
I also think with Lynch though too, in his editing, he does take his time.
Yeah.
And one of the big problems with this movie, and actually Nick tweeted this out last night, and I don't know if you still feel this way once you finish the movie, is that it was a little too fast. It was a little too
quick.
breakneck. Yeah,
it was quick. Like things were just jumping. But now that Adam has said this, that is sort of how a nightmare feels too.
Yeah.
In a sense. I mean, don't your nightmares sort of jump around, and 1 second you ever have one of those experiences where 1 second you're one person and then suddenly you're a different person in your dream?
Yep. Right.
And there's like it literally does that
kind of
in this
happens
film.
in this movie.
Right.
On occasion.
People enter the room and exit the room. They just appear out of nowhere.
Or they're different people.
Right.
Suddenly, without really explanation.
But it's the weird things that don't make sense in a nightmare. And the thing is, the movie treats it as if it's just a natural thing that happens. Because in a nightmare, there's nothing you can really do about it. It's just happening, and when you're there, you're in it and you accept it.